That whole adage of you can be anything that you want to be, it's absolutely idiotic.
We are connected to everything, but we're anchored to nothing.
Interrogating reality is a willingness to be anchored to true self. It's the capacity of who you could be, but it's not who you are.
Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It's your girl, Breezy, and I am here, Mr. Adrian Crawford. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well.
You were in the big city last week, right? Last weekend?
2 weeks ago.
No. Polk County.
Oh,
big city.
I thought you were talking about when I went to New York 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I was in New York 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Nice.
But then I was in Polk County last weekend for my dad's wedding.
Nice.
Shout out my dad. He's a great dancer. He's a really cool dude.
He is.
He walked down the aisle to So Fresh, So Clean by Outkast.
I know. Me and your dad got to hang out. It's crazy.
Yeah, y'all would be great friends.
That's what I'm saying. It's crazy. As long as I've known you, I haven't even met your dad.
I don't think so.
No,
maybe briefly.
Yeah. But I need to hang out with your pops because every time you talk to me, like we like the same music, the whole deal. So I think we would get along well. So.
Yeah, we'd be great friends. So we had an episode that dropped 2 weeks ago or so that got some pretty good coverage.
Yeah.
And it was about the USA men's basketball team. And we had a comment.
Okay.
That was like, this guy knows nothing about basketball. And from that comment, we realized that we've never really talked much about your basketball career on the podcast, like especially since it's been revamped. We've never really done that. And so for those of you who don't know, Adrian is a very tall guy. You can't tell, but how tall are you?
6'6".
So tell us a little bit about your basketball career.
Yeah, I think some people may know if you've listened. I'm a coach's kid, so I've been around basketball. I was around basketball my entire life. Picked up a basketball at the age of 4, and it was like the first thing that ever made sense to me. I don't remember learning how to shoot a basketball. I just remember knowing I could shoot a basketball, and it was kind of like my safe haven. It was the thing that kind of honestly, like, I think it was a young kid, kind of kept me alive. And I just fell in love with playing it. And then, man, I moved back to Akron, Ohio. And though I didn't want to move back to Akron was, I never would have been the basketball player if I never moved back to Akron. You know, Akron really molded and shaped me to the player I was. And so I was like a slow developer. I just kept getting better year by year. And then right around the 7th or 8th grade, I started growing pretty much, I think, from like 6th grade, 7th grade, all the way to like my 11th grade year. I grew like probably like an inch or 2 inches every year. And man, I just kept getting better. And it was right around going to my senior year. I was playing in a camp, NBA Player Association camp the first year. And in my class that came out, number one guy in our class was Bryant. We had a bunch of other NBA guys, Richard Hamilton, Tim Thomas, guys like that. And man, I came out and I played incredibly well. I went from like top 200 to like top 25, like top 50. I ended up settling at the end of it in top 75 in the country. And I ended up playing University of Tulsa my first year, transferred, played at Florida State, then played a little professional basketball after that. So I've played a little bit of basketball, and then I started Skill Basketball Academy and trained a bunch of pro athletes and Division I athletes. So basketball ball really is life for me. I've been around I've really been around it a long time. So, and Lauren just said, that's so corny.
Immediate eye contact.
I know, whatever.
That was funny. I forgot what I was going to say because I wasn't expecting you to say ball is life. So you got to spend time around Kobe and Michael Jordan. Do you have any memorable experiences with them? Yeah,
I do. Kobe was very different. He was obsessive about playing basketball. I mean, I love playing basketball. A lot of us love to play the game. We worked at the game, but he was obsessive about it. And you saw that. I mean, it's the reason why he became who he was, because he just had a different gear to him. And so he was just different. I was competitive. He was just like, it was psychotic competitive. He actually had what they call a kill list. Anybody that was ranked above him, it was literally his kill list. He wanted to be better. And he started his sophomore year. By his senior year, he was better than everyone that was on that list. And so he just had a competitive nature about him. Michael Jordan was interesting. I met him when I was in the 6th grade. And he's just different. I met him, and I'll never forget the first question I asked him. It's like those moments you meet a hero and you feel like and you got all these questions lined up, but like you stand in front of him and you're just like, you don't know what to say. So I just like literally asked him how tall he was. And I'm like, dude, and you walk away, you're in so much shame as a kid. You're like, I know how tall he is. I knew he was born in Brooklyn, New York, lived in Wilmington, North Carolina, all this stuff. And I'm like, that's what you asked him. Of all the things you could have asked him, you moron. And so anyway, so I've still been dealing with that in therapy, the shame I had, about, 30 years ago. So anyway, yeah, so that's when, so those two interactions were incredible. I've been very, very fortunate to meet people like Magic Johnson and Shaquille O'Neal. And yeah, I've been around a lot of really good basketball players.
That's actually an incredible segue into our topic today. But before we get into that, we just want to say that if the New Rules podcast has added any value to you, will you please like and subscribe and talk back to us. Leave us some comments about what it is you like about the podcast, some things that you would like for us to talk about, because we love to hear from you.
And even you haters out there that get spicy in the comments, I like listening to you. Especially, like I said, I want to go back to the dude who left the comments. So happy he lapses to list us about his basketball IQ. I'm like, I just love how people have such a strong IQ. This guy knows nothing about basketball. All right, Rick.
Her basketball IQ.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. All right, Rick. Shut up, Adrian. Just keep on moving. All right.
I think you need to zoom in on his
because I don't like when people say this when you're like, what makes you an expert? It's like when everybody says, shut up and dribble. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm sorry, Bob, that your job at Home Depot makes you now a political analyst. I'm like, come on, man. Anyway. My own bone. Let's get back to the podcast. I'm going to be positive today.
Today's episode is about interrogating reality.
Yes, that's what, yeah, my main.
Great for Rick and Bob.
Yeah.
So getting back to some of your interactions with Michael Jordan, whenever we talk about this topic of interrogate reality, you actually tell a story about a time where you played with him, if I'm correct. Mm-hmm. So can you share a little bit about that? Yeah,
it was my sophomore year in college. I was Nike would bring some of the top players in, and they would work his camp. He had a summer camp that he would do up in Chicago. And so, but he was there the entire time during the camp. And so, it was campers who came out, this again, it cost a lot of money being a camp, whatever. But we, as college players, we got to work his camp, and so it was really cool. And so, this is right after him winning his 6th championship. And so it was it was like the second night we were there, we played pickup every night in front of the campers. So that's, play 5-on-5 or whatever. And so he was going to play with us that night, so again, you have to understand, like, this is Black Jesus to us. Okay. Like literally we called him Black Jesus. And so like Mike came, when you're around him and he hung out with us, there's just this aura about him. Like it really is. Like, I feel like there's like this golden light around him. Like, you get around this dude, you're like, yo, you're just a cool dude, regardless of whatever. Right. And so he comes out there and so I am going to play the second game. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching, and it was one of the most disorienting moments of my life. You have to understand, I had a shrine in my room of Michael Jordan, legit shrine. Like, the back of, my wall that was behind my bed, it had this huge wall, and it was literally top to bottom, covered posters, pictures of Michael Jordan. And there was not an ounce of paint you could see. You just saw pictures of Michael Jordan. So this was my hero. there was even a Gatorade commercial that was called, like, they had a song called Like Mike. I'm not going to sing it right now. Wow. But man, I had the lyrics to that song up on my wall. I literally wanted to be like Mike. It was my mantra, right? I was manifesting, I guess, because I was a valley girl from California. So I was manifesting myself to try to be like Michael Jordan one time. And so anyway, so I'm now there, right there. He's there, and I'm getting a chance to watch him. And so everything I did in my basketball career was like, I wanted to be like Mike. So I always thought, man, I'm going to be as good as him, or at least close to as good as him. That's what you work for. You find the standard and you work toward the standard. And I will never forget, I'm sitting there, I'm watching him. Now, I had watched all Michael Jordan videos. I had seen like so many of his games. I'd even watched him live before. But being right there, I'm talking about, right there on the court, getting ready to play next, getting a chance to see him. And it was so disorienting because as I'm watching him, like, reality struck. That it did not matter how hard I worked out. It did not matter how much I prayed. It did not matter anything. I would never be that good. And I tell you, it was so disorienting, because if your whole life you're trying to compare yourself and want to be like this person, and now that person's in front of you and you have to measure up against that person, and you realize the gap between you and that person, and you realize, like, I'm never going to be that. It really is like very disheartening and heartbreaking, and left me kind of spinning for a little bit. But little did I know was that moment actually was one of the first clues of actually what I really would be, my superpower, what I really do now. But at that moment, it was crazy because I realized I was not living in reality. And then when I was faced with the reality of Michael Jordan, the whole thing changed.
So what did that do to you?
I mean, all this, I'm processing all this, and like, you know, like I'm on the, you know, like you're sitting there watching, I'm about to play next. And so like, I mean, I was just in a fog. I mean, because I get on the court next game and I'm playing and he's playing with this whatever. And I'm like literally in a fog. Like, I don't even remember, like, playing. I'm just like, you know, because it was just I think when I look back on it now, like, I was sad. I was just, like, disappointed. You become hopeless because you're like, man, like, what am I even working this hard for? And so that's so there's a lot of internal feelings that are actually going on during that time.
So from that moment, how old were you?
I was 20, I believe.
So you were 20 years old. And did your actions change? Did you still have this idea in your mind of what your future looked like? Or did you start to reshape your future?
Yeah, I mean, in that moment, I was, you know, and I can't remember how long it was, if it was just for that night or for a couple days or whatever. I was like kind of in that fog, sad, disappointed, all that. But I didn't realize this, but something inside of me kept processing, was like, why do I feel the way that I feel? And so I kept asking myself that question. I'm like, man, you know, I was like trying to figure out I understand, like, on the surface level, yes, man, you think you could be somebody and you're standing next to that person, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, it's like if you paint next to Picasso, you're like, oh yeah, he's much better than I am, more talented, right? But what I started realizing was that I think what was going on inside of me was that I felt this sense of like hopelessness, because I was like, man, well, if I'm not going to be, you know, you're always taught as an athlete or whatever. My family, you know, my father taught me, man, you drive to be the best. You drive to be the best. And when you realize, but no one ever talks about, like, what if you're not the best? Like, what if you're like, you know, again, and it was crazy for me to say that because, you know, coming out of high school, I was like, you know, top 50, top 75 in the country. I wasn't the best. But it's like, but you're always driving with the hope that you could be that. And see, the thing about it was that I couldn't articulate this way now. But what it was such a wake-up call. It was like somebody giving you like smelling salts. I'm like, oh. And what it started making me do is like I started realizing I had to reframe what winning looked like for me personally, and I had to reframe how my game was. Like now, all of a sudden, instead of me looking at Michael Jordan to actually develop my game around, I started looking at somebody who's out more like. What was a player that I could actually see, or a few players that I actually could learn from? And that's where I began to kind of reshape and recraft really kind of my basketball game. And really, I didn't realize that me doing that actually was going to be a big part of what I would actually end up doing. I would do that multiple times actually in my life.
What are the 2 to 3 things that you would hope that listeners would take away from the story?
I think the first thing is that like, you have to interrogate reality. Interrogating something is really a systematic way of asking questions to find answers, to get to the truth. I think most people, if I could tell them right now, would be interrogate reality. Are you living in reality? Because I believe that we live in a world right now where a lot of people do not live in reality. I think that most people today are actually drunk on their potential. They're drunk on the fact that they think they should be treated. They think they should get money. They think they should get titles and roles or whatever, respect, based off of their potential, not based off actually who they are. And so what you'll do is you'll walk around thinking you're something that you're really not. And when somebody's not living in reality, we can say that we diagnose them as having some type of illness, right? A lot of people have mental illness in our world today because they actually really think they're something that they're not. I mean, how many times you go on Instagram and you see somebody like, oh, entrepreneur in their bio? You're like, fam, like you couldn't sell you couldn't sell yourself out of a box, right? Or you go and you see somebody else, oh, I'm a fitness expert. And you're like, really? Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, I mean, it's like me saying I'm a fitness expert. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, nah, it's not it. But I think people live that way because why? And so I would say that's the first thing. Like, you have to actually, are you living in reality? 2, it's okay to feel bad that you didn't measure up or that you're not as good. Like, it's okay. Like, we don't like the feeling of failure. And so I would tell you, it's okay. Get used to that feeling of actual failure. third thing I want people to understand about that story is this. And even though I didn't mention this in the story or say it, but this is something that's said a lot. That whole adage of you can be anything that you want to be. It's absolutely idiotic. And if you believe that, like, stop believing it, because you can't. You know what? Because let me tell you this. I worked incredibly hard. I mean, I was disciplined at what I did. I mean, I even had physical tools. You know what I mean? It wasn't like I was like 4'11". You know what I'm saying? I'm 6'6". I was the same size as Michael Jordan. I was a pretty good athlete, all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I was like, I realized, man, it didn't matter how hard I tried or whatever, I was never going to be whatever I wanted to be. I was never going to be the best basketball player to ever walk the planet. And so I think you have to come to a reality that, like, stop believing that stuff, because the more you live in that, you're living in an illusion. And I see so many people disappointed in life. So many people go through life just in a fog. So many people dealing with some mental health issues and things like that, feeling disappointment, blaming other people, whatever it is, because it's not because of them. It's just they're not living in reality because they've been told they can be anything they want to be.
Why do you think that we get drunk on potential?
Because honestly, I think that my generation and the generation above me, I'm Gen X and baby boomers. I think especially like Gen X and some baby boomers, we didn't like millennials and Gen Z, like our, kids or whatever, to actually feel pain. And so what we did is, like, everybody talks about participation trophies and things like that, right? But it's like, it's not like all of a sudden, like, you woke up one day, Bri, you're like, you know what, man, I want a participation trophy. I want to be feeling like I'm equal. No, like, adults did that. And it's because there was adults who could not deal with the fact of their child, like the pain of their child having disappointment. And so we created this kind of environment. So what it's led to now is that people cannot live in, like, that pain of disappointment. They don't know what it's like. They don't know how to actually fail and to lose at something and be okay, and then not, like, attack every bit of their identity. And so what they do is they just keep going and keep living, because it's easier to just live in a disillusioned world all the time.
You actually spoke to FAMU students recently on this topic, and you did an incredible job. So great job at that.
Appreciate it.
And something that you said was that we are connected to everything, but we're anchored to nothing. Can you tie that into this? Yeah.
I had the privilege of speaking to, they have a ceremony for all the incoming freshmen at Florida A&M University, the number one, like, HBCU in the country. And it was a great honor to speak there. And when I said that, is because in our world today, because of social and just technology and access, we are connected everywhere. I mean, we can find out what's happening in another country just like that. We can talk to somebody in another country. Literally before I got on here, I was DMing back and forth with a friend of mine who's actually in Australia. He's in Brisbane, Australia. And so, like, man, he's a friend of mine, and we were just texting back and forth. I mean, like, back in the day, I mean, dude, like, I'd have to send a letter, you know what I'm saying? And they'd be like, all right, well, hopefully he gets it, you know what I'm saying? He'll write me back, and I'll get it in about a month. And so now you have instant connection to people. You know more about people's lives. You have connection to what everyone else is doing, what they're doing well at, and everybody also presents the best version of themselves online or whatever. And so what ends up happening is, like, we're connected. And so when you're connected, but we're not anchored anywhere. So it's like, oh yeah, because I got a connection here. So I'm looking at this and I'm measuring myself off this. I'm doing this, but you're not anchored anywhere. Think about a connection. You can pull a connection out of a wall really easy. It's a whole different thing if you've ever been on a boat and a boat being anchored in. It's a lot more difficult for an anchor to come up versus pulling a plug out of a wall. And so the whole idea is, when I was saying that, is that one of the most important things about not living in unreality, but actually living and interrogating reality, is a willingness to be anchored to true self, a willingness to understand and do the hard work to figure out actually who you are, and not live on the idea of, like, your potential, but actually to live in just the nature of actually who you are, so on and so forth.
Does potential ever matter? Yeah,
potential does matter, because I think potential, it really is it's the capacity, it's the capacity of who you could be, but it's not who you are. There's so many people, I mean, that you've known before, like, man, you're like, they're just talented, but they never really, but you go back to your hometown and you see this person, you know what I'm saying? And they're like, man, you thought they were going to be the one who got out of the city. You're going to be the one who's going to, play a professional sport, go on, be a model, do whatever, right? And all of a sudden now they're still back in the hometown. I mean, really not living up to their potential. And I think that that's where a lot of people just live. They live in, especially now, because when you don't have the ability to know how I have potential, but you have to do a lot of hard work to make that potential actually turn into reality and production. And that's one of the things I said to the students. I'm like, potential doesn't listen, NBA dudes are the only ones who get paid and the first part of their contract on potential. And that only lasts for a couple of years, right? Almost, and that's, you got to be a top 10 pick. Everybody else, man, you get paid off production. And that's what I said to those students. I'm like, they're going to be entering into a job market that'll be incredibly difficult in 4 years. And if they don't learn who they are, and if they don't get off this whole thing of becoming sober in reality and interrogate reality of who they are, I was like, a lot of them are going to face a really tough market because they're going to want somebody to pay them off their potential, not off of actually their ability and their production.
I saw that you mentioned something about echo chambers.
Yeah, because the echo chambers are that we can get online and we can just be around people who are just saying what we want to hear. And just take not being online, just take people's friendships. Like, I can't tell you how many times I hear people, like, I'll give you a great example. This is my favorite. Like, so one of the things that I love, but I also laugh at is when someone posts, especially a female, post on Instagram and just going and just looking at the comments, right? Because for example, my daughter will post something, right? Brooklyn will post something, and dude, the level of hype that you get on the comment, you know what I'm saying? The level of hype. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? All this stuff. You go down, you're like, dude, I'm like, man, I want to post a picture. You know what I'm saying? I was the homies would say something like that. You know what I'm saying? But they're not, so anyway. But
I think the FSU men's basketball team a few years ago, they were like that with each other.
Dude, FSU men's basketball team, again, especially when we were really rolling the new bloods. The ones who are part, they still do it. Them dudes were they're always commenting, whatever. But here's the deal, is that, and I'm using that and whatever, but so many times, we just surround ourselves with people. That's all they do. Even in real life, they just hype us up. And when you say something if your friend is always mean, they're just mean, but then all of a sudden someone says that, someone, just a random person say God, why are you, you're mean, you're this, and they really are mean. And then their friends will be like, oh, no, you're not mean. You're not that. Man, you got, positive vibes. You can't get that type of negative energy around you. No, she's freaking mean. She's a hurt, broken girl, and she's negative. And no one wants to tell her that. So she'll go through life being that way. And everybody else is just kind of oh, no. And you just get in this echo chamber, and you live not in reality. And I think it's one of the saddest things in life for people who don't have anyone in their life to tell them you suck at this, or you're a jerk, or you're whatever. It's the greatest gift because it makes you stay grounded and connected. And I'm not saying you don't need to have, some people have that all the time in their life, and that you need to have some people who hype you up. But I think most of the time now, people just want to be around people who are just speaking nothing but these positive things. And I get it. It's because, listen, life is painful. Things are emotional. They're painful. And so just to hear that you're not good at something, that's emotionally painful. So I get why people I'd rather just be hyped versus hearing what I'm not good at. But it's a very long term, it's a very dangerous thing.
What else gets in the way of us seeing ourselves correctly?
I think that not having a good evaluation, or here's the thing, accepting skill sets. I don't know if I've mentioned it here before. I think I have, but my favorite quote from Parker J. Palmer, don't tell your life what you intend to do with, but ask your life what it intends to do with you, what values you hold, what values you hold, what vision that it has for you. And what he's ultimately getting to is your life is already speaking to you. But do you ever evaluate your skill set? Have you, you've been around people before where they'll be like, oh man, listen, we used to see it all the time on American Idol, right? People, oh man, I can sing. And you're like, God, who told you that? Who, and they genuinely,
and their families in the corner,
that's exactly what I'm talking about. They're like, oh no. And then they leave, and what happened? Oh, they just aren't ready for your type of voice or your type of talent. And you're like, and that's what I'm saying. People live that, people live this way. And they go around in their whole life and they're wondering why. I don't think people want to accept the reality of their skill set. That's one thing. The second thing is this. You have to accept this. You're regular. Like, most people are regular. There's only been a few thousand people that have ever moved the world. Most of all of us are regular, and it's okay. Because when you start to realize you're ordinary, you can actually become extraordinary at what you do, at whatever skill set that you have. And so I think that's important. Most people just will not accept and even do the hard work to figure out what actually their skill set is and get underneath it. And so if not, you'll just end up trying to do something you think is going to make you popular, get followers, make a certain amount of money, so on and so forth.
What are some tools that you use to interrogate reality?
My wife wants for like 100%. Like
my children.
Not my wife, my children. That's one thing too. Like,
your kids are ruthless.
We have, and again, it's the gift and the curse of trying to raise emotionally healthy children that like. They are healthy, and they will, like, we talk about telling the truth and being honest, whatever. Yeah, I could never get away with certain things. So, like, my family for sure. And again, in a really, really good way, because you know what? There's no one who will, like, hype you up like your family, but I actually think real family actually really, healthy family actually critiques you as well. That's at my friends, my really close friends. That's why they are my close friends. Because they will be the greatest encouragers, but when I am off, they'll be the first ones to tell me. A lot of times I evaluate, what am I actually producing? Because like there's evidence. So, going back to the story, one of the things I didn't realize that was evidence in the breadcrumb in that moment was the fact of like, I could have saw Michael Jordan and still lived in unreality. I could have been like, nope, you know what? I'm just going to work harder. Nope. You know what? I'm just going to do this. God's going to do this, whatever. I could have come up with whatever reason, whatever thing I wanted to. But in that moment, I stopped to realize, and I was asking the question, what's actually happening in me? I'm like, why am I upset? Now, at that point in time, I thought that was normal. But come to find out later in my life, probably about 13 years later, I'm sitting in a therapist's office. And, one of the leading therapists in the country, he literally was telling me, he's like, the way that you think it's normal. A lot of people don't think this way. A lot of people don't instantly drive to, okay, what's my driver? What about this? What about this? Whatever. And so I started looking, that was evidence, even in that moment, of actually what one of my skill sets would be, is being able to get to the basement of stuff. Because I feel like a lot of times people don't ever really get to the real issues of things. That's why they can't get better. And so that was the skill set of mine. So I say, you got to look at the evidence. So what's the evidence for you? I mean, man, whatever you see evidence in, you're good at, man, celebrate that. Like, double down on that. And the things that you're not, it's okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, move those to the side, keep going after the things. Try to find the things that you really do good. So I think my family, my friends, and also just evaluating the results of my life. Look at the fruit of your life. Look at the results of your life. And I think that helps you stay grounded in reality.
So even if your friends or your family, people that you trust, are giving you kind of feedback to snap you back into reality, you still have the opportunity to respond. Like, you still have to have the resilience and the willpower to take what it is that they're saying and apply it to their life. And we have this analogy for responses about alligator, samurai, or surgeon. So can you kind of tie that into this? Yeah.
So a few years back, I don't even remember how I came up with it. I don't remember who I was talking to, but it literally came to me on the fly. I was literally talking to somebody, and I was trying to come up with something that actually explained how they were responding to correction and helping them. And it just came to me, the idea of, like, first of all, like an alligator, when you're getting correction or somebody's trying to help, like, bring you to reality, you're going to respond one of three ways. One is the alligator. So we live here in Florida. So you know what? Alligators are everywhere. Think about an alligator has very tough skin. Like, incredibly tough skin. And so sometimes when people are trying to bring you to reality and someone like tries to, like, it's like a sword piercing you or someone trying to cut you, what we will do is we will deny that. We will blame other people. We will say, nope, not real, not true. You're a hater. You don't, again, whatever, right? You just don't believe in me. And we won't receive any of the information, right? I can do that. I mean, there's been times I've done that with my wife, with my children, with whoever. Nah, they just don't understand me, right? Because, listen, me being creative and doing things like that, it's always easy for creatives to say people don't understand you. You know what I'm saying? They always can go there, they don't really understand me. And you're like, all right, whatever. But, like, they actually do, and they actually care for me. But I would, like, reject that. The other side, which you go to the samurai. And one of the things that they would talk about, what samurais would do, like they would die on their sword. That was like, so that was a more beautiful death, was the idea that they would literally, would die on their sword as soldiers. And so what they do, you literally would take a sword and you run yourself through. And what that is when someone corrects you, you go to instant, you're the worst person ever. So if someone's just trying to say like, hey, you know what, man, like Bri, man, when you said this today, man, that was a little off. And I mean, I don't think, or let me get something like Bri, I don't think this is more of like your skill set right here. I think this is it. And then what you would go if you're a samurai.
I would say, you know what, you're right. I'm the worst. I'm really not good at much of anything. Thank you for reminding me that I'm just really not that good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now you go there. So then what happens when somebody does that? You're like, crap, well, I'll never want to say anything to you because I got to check on you, do like a freaking wellness check to make sure you're like still alive. Like, I mean, and so so like that's one way you can go. And then listen, and there's people who I know who do that all the time. And here's what happens. And when people do that, like, and again, and I'm saying, cause I've done both of them. So and so it's like this, but when you do that, it's such like this thing of like, it comes off as like, oh, I'm so humble. No, you're not. That's the moment for you that you're just begging for somebody to say, no, it's okay. You're fine. Like, and you want people to pay attention to you. It's like, it's wild. Anyway, going from there, I think the best way you can receive and actually stay in reality is to be a patient. So you think about a patient somebody has surgery. They lay on the operating table, willfully lay on the table. And then the surgeon cuts you, but you allow a surgeon to cut you, but the surgeon cuts you deep enough to heal you, not to hurt you. And I think that most people don't want to lay on the operating table and actually allow someone to cut them. Not allow. And again, how do you get cut? Man, friends, family, looking at the evidence of your life, you know what I'm saying? Boss, coworkers, whatever. Those are ways at times to actually help you to cut you so that you can actually get better, and actually get a better correction. And so you can actually move on with your life.
What about people who look for too much feedback?
Yeah, that's a great one because I was, getting too much feedback can actually cause you to not live in reality too. Because that was I have been the king of that for a long time. It's probably been until maybe the last 5 years, 6 years, maybe, that I've actually like stopped doing it. I mean, I used to be obsessive about that because I'd worked for some people and also, let me not even blame them. It was my own insecurity. Because what I would do is ask all these people, hey, am I good enough at this? Hey, what do you think about this? Hey, what do you think about this? Hey, what do you think about this? Because really what I was wanting them to do is to tell me, am I good enough? Am I not? I need you to tell me if I'm good enough or not. But what that can do is if you start asking so many different people, like, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Give me feedback. Sometimes we'll ask feedback to people who have no idea your history or know anything about you, and they'll give you stuff, and then you'll start believing them. And what they may be telling you is absolutely false and negative. And what it also can leave you into not reality is that you can stay in a loop of just always trying to find like advice and things like that. Am I doing this right? What about this? What about this? And you just stay in this loop and you don't ever produce anything. Like, let me tell you this. If you aren't producing something or moving something or going somewhere, like, then if you call yourself something, whatever it is, right? It's like being a doctor, but you never practice medicine. Or it's like, man, whatever, I'm a basketball player, but you've never been on a team and you've never picked up basketball before. It's like, no, you have to do something. And I think so many times people can get so much advice that they stay looping and never produce. And they actually think they're doing something, but they're not living in reality, because that's what can happen. We can actually think our thoughts many times, what we think is actually production or doing something. And it's not, they're just thoughts. Any other questions, thoughts before we?
Why does that feel like when you're like dreaming about things, it really does sometimes feel like you did them. I'm like, why do I feel like I did these things?
When you dream about them?
Yeah, but like not like literal dream, but I can like think like all these things that I think I could do, and I'm like, that was good. Then go about my day.
Yeah.
Like, why is like that should be like?
Yeah, I feel that way too.
Yeah, like why is that so satisfying? And then I know that that's not like long term, but then I'll just do it again in like a week.
I think it's because, like, if you have, like, an imagination, for example, right? like, for example, both of you like have like, you both have like creative parts of who you are. And so because I think you have creative parts of who you are, there's something very fulfilling about like imagining things, right? And like visualizing them and actually, and it actually feels good, because sometimes when you're like dealing with the everyday pain of life or just whatever, the struggle to do stuff, there's something about just being able to like go into another world to visualize something. And it's like, and you visualize that you got it done. And it's like this temporary moment of like, even though it's not real, it just feels satisfying. There's relief that's actually there. And I think that because it's actually the power of like your creativity, because I know that's what happens with me for a long time. Early on, that's what I would say. That's when I really started to change, because I would be the guy with all the ideas, could visualize the ideas. My imagination was actually was a superpower as well for me. And then what I would do is think about all these ideas. Man, I was, this business, that idea, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And then talk about it. And I could talk about it like I was an expert and do all those things, but then nothing was really getting done until one day an older friend of mine was like, man, like and I think I've said this before, you want to break things down to see how it works, but you actually have to make things work. Because if not, because he really said this, he's like, you're not a creative if you don't make things work. If you're not bringing something, he's like, you're not. He was like, what you are, he's like, you're a dreamer. You know what I'm saying? But you're not a creator, because creators do what they create. There's something that goes from maybe it's a thought to something that's a tangible thing. And so I think it's satisfying when you can do that, because here's the other thing too. When you're going from a thought to actual bringing something there, you all know this, like it's freaking really hard to take an idea. It's really easy to have an idea and dream about that idea. Man, to take that idea and bring it to the earth. I mean, like the fact of the matter, like when I tell people, like when I first started doing, like when I did a basketball skill training thing, nobody was really doing basketball skill training, and especially not in an industry here in the city we live in. And so it was an idea in my brain, and dude, the level of pain and stuff it took to make that a reality. The level of pain it took for, hey, can we build a multi-ethnic church in the South that could be multi-use space, and could it be about launching people by all this way? It was a thought that went here. What we've done in our consulting firm is a thought that went here. But we all know that thought was there, but bringing it to real life has been a lot of pain. And so I think that it's easier to stay in those dream states because it just gives you temporary moments of relief.
What's the first step that you recommend listeners take in interrogating reality?
I think the first thing is telling yourself it's okay. It's okay not to be good at something. It's okay to find out what you're not good at. And it may be disappointing. You may be sad when when you start really facing reality of stuff, when you come to like how I did with like Michael Jordan. I'm like, oh man, I'm never going to be that good. But be curious and compassionate about why you feel that way. Why do you feel that way? Why are you sad? Why are you hopeless? Whatever it may be. And be compassionate. That's just part of the process. But be willing to feel the pain of it. You're going to be disappointed. Because listen, when I realized I wasn't going to be that, man, I was mourning. Because I'm like, this is what I always wanted to do. This was always my dream. This is always what I do. And then I finally got there. And then when I finally got there, it was like, oh, I'm not going to be this. This is where we're at. And so I would tell you, be willing to embrace and lean into that pain. Well, guys, hey, I hope today was actually helpful for you. And here's what I want to encourage you with. The reason why, at times we talk very direct here, is because life is incredibly short. And I want all of you to actually go out there and find something that you love to do, that you're actually talented, skilled, that you've been willing to, that you got the skill set to go do. And more than anything else, you're willing to get lost in it. Like I tell you, that's one of the greatest feelings in the world, is to find what you feel called to, and it just captures you. Like it has a hold of you. Like this idea of unlocking authenticity, launching authentic leaders into the world, helping people writing the rules, it's literally captured me. And so for that, man, that vision, that's what pushes me and fuels me, is this thing. But I found that. And that's why I hope that you don't go through life chasing and being something you were never meant to be. Trying to have a life that somebody else wants you to live, trying to be like someone you see on social. And man, that is a horrible way to live life being something that you were never meant to be. So I encourage you, go find, interrogate reality, and keep writing new rules.